Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. Tonight, we have Ben Kinsley joining us as co-host. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Pat.
Hello, good to see you. And our special guest tonight is no stranger to any of you, the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Anson Tebbetts is joining us tonight, and we're very glad to see him and have him on the show. Lots to talk about. Ensign, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and thanks for the chance to talk about agriculture, food, and markets.
Yes. Can I? This is something just hit me. When was Food and Markets added? Was that a long
Well, it
time
was.
ago, or?
I think it may have been during it. It was before my time, but when it became a department and it went to an agency, so that must have been during the. I want to say during the Douglas administration. It
Yes,
probably switched
and I
over to
was.
that.
Yep, and I was there because you do have a lot of food and you're in a lot of markets, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right,
Well,
so
and
we always.
how appropriate too that we're
Yeah.
having this show in like the middle of sugaring season. I just got to say that it seems like a very appropriate time to do
Oh
this.
God. I know we went riding the other day. Actually, we're up in Calais around that area, and everybody's got their sugar in. The smoke was coming out of the chimneys. It was so cool.
Yeah, seen
Yeah,
it
it's great.
everywhere on Instagram and Twitter.
Exactly.
Well,
And since so we start out, if you remember, talking a little bit about yourself, and if you could introduce yourself to
Yeah.
those who actually may not know you, that'd be a surprise.
Well, I'm coming to you from the homestead here in Cabot, where I grew up. I grew up on a dairy farm. It's been in the family a long time, so I'm blessed. I'm still on the property that my parents and grandparents and great grandparents had, and it is a certified organic dairy right now. And
Oh,
we lease a lot of the land to a wonderful farm family over on the other side of the hill, and they bring their heifers over in the summertime, so we have heifers, but they use it for cropping. They do a lot of haying. They keep the land open, and I've got a few silly pets. We do not milk cows anymore, but I've got some sheep and I've got some beef cattle. So we're trying to keep it as active as we can in agriculture. But I'm really fortunate to have a farmer nearby that keeps it in agriculture and keeps the land in working agriculture. So it's kind of nice.
that's great. And before agriculture?
Before I took this position, I was in television. I've been in television and radio and broadcasting for a number of years, about 20 years. I went to a college in Boston called Emerson College, which was a
Mhm.
communications college. Left there, came up here. Was fortunate enough to come back to my home state and get a job in the industry I trained for down in Boston, which was radio, and I worked for WDEV for a number of years. From WDEV, I moved to Rutland, and I was down in Rutland for a while, covering Southern Vermont for WCX TV. And from there, I went to and where I ran into you a lot, Pat, was at the State House in your various
Right.
positions, from DMV commissioner to labor and transportation. I was a State House reporter covering state government. Um, and then I was deputy secretary of ag for a little bit. And then when Marcellus Parsons retired from Channel 3 as the news director, I went back to Channel 3 to be the news director and sort of manage the newsroom, which was keeping an eye on the reporters and the photographers and editors and producers. And then 4 years ago, when Governor Scott was elected, he asked me to come be the secretary of ag. So I guess that's my life history. There it is, all in a
Oh,
minute and a half.
yeah, exactly.
Lots
Well,
of different things for sure.
But
it's
I'm still living in 1987. I have to admit, everyone, I'm still one of those 80s people. I still don't believe, I don't remember the 90s. I don't remember the 2000s really, but I just, for some reason, going to college and young and whatever, you remember that whole time. So sometimes I get stuck like, no, it's not 1987. And my, jeans aren't $4,
oh,
stuff like that.
Oh my
that's the
God.
truth.
It's like that kind of stuff.
So, Ensign, February 19th, the governor signed an executive order creating a commission that was focused on the future of agriculture. And this commission is charged with studying and strategizing how best to grow agriculture in the Green Mountain State. Could you talk about that commission? Because there's been a couple of articles written about it and all very positive.
Yeah, this actually comes out of COVID. As things shut down and some markets were lost, you saw people refocused on the basics again. And one of the basics, I think, was agriculture. We went back to sort of went back to local agriculture as well. But through that, we understood we had some gaps. We had some, markets were disrupted, but everyone's been home, so we've been cooking. So butter is big again, flour is big again. All of those, people, especially early on, went to farmers markets. They went to farm stands. They felt more comfortable being outside buying for them. We saw an explosion of meat processing and people wanting local meat because sometimes they couldn't get what they wanted in a traditional, bigger supermarket. So through this, we discovered there's lots of opportunities and there's lots of gaps, and so we needed to call everyone together. So we're gonna work until November. We're gonna start working in April, and we have not. As a recording this right now, we have not named those members yet, but it's made up of 14 people, and it'll be from all the industries that are critical for agriculture in Vermont. So there'll be someone from dairy, there'll be someone from dairy processing, there'll be someone from maple, there'll be someone from produce, there'll be some people that are in business, land use. All those will get together,
Great.
and I think we'll get to we'll get something in front of the governor that addresses some of these issues that we need attention, and I think it will chart the course for a while, and hopefully we'll be able to figure out some of these things that we know are there. We know meat processing. We know we need more capacity. We need more help with labor. We need all those kind of things. We need infrastructure. Infrastructure is incredibly important in agriculture. If you don't have the efficiencies and sort of, all that stuff and state-of-the-art equipment, and those are big investments. So that's, I think, the focus of what we want to do. It's going to be made up of, real people that are in the business.
Oh,
And
good.
we're not going to try to, there'll be occasionally a couple of policy wonks, you got to have that on every commission. But for the most part, these are people that are working the land, working in business, have real practical experience, and we'll reach out to the general public as well and get their input on it.
That's
So that's
great.
sort of the focus.
I knew when you came on the show last time, meat processing was a huge issue about a year or so ago because there were no places to bring the meat, and it was a big issue.
Yes, and it's still an issue, and
So,
we're still we've identified some areas. We've seen a couple of new operations that are startups. We've got one in northern Vermont that's going to begin. We've got one in southern Vermont. But we need labor is a big issue. We're having difficulty finding people to work in that particular industry. So we're working with the labor department, working on some training programs. We're going to try to work with VTC on one. We're trying to, we could train people, but it's difficult to train people when the plant is being occupied and you can't get some training in there. So we want to have maybe a sort of a place where people could go and train during the day, and those people could then be placed in these various processing plants throughout the state. So a lot of work's being done on it, but we're well from declaring victory on that yet.
oh, well, I hope he's success because that's been a couple of years. From what I remember, it was pretty serious.
Yeah.
But anyway, Ben.
And there's some grant money involved in this too, right? I think like 25 million. Is that right? That's involved. That's federal dollars.
Yeah, we had a granting program that came from the CARES dollars. The first CARES dollars that came to Vermont, the governor and the legislature, we worked out a system where we each sector got some dollars. So the Agency of Agriculture had, in the end, we had about $26 million that went back into the agriculture economy, whether it was to dairy farmers, whether it was to dairy processors, and others in meat processing, or they had a farm stand, or if they had a farmer's market. We had some money that went to fairs and field days. We had some farm to school grants. In total, we did about 1,000 businesses through that granting program in late summer, early fall, and those dollars went back into the farm economy. And those were the state dollars. There's also been some federal dollars run through USDA that helped direct payments to our dairy farmers that got them through some very, very difficult times about 2 months after the pandemic, when things really closed up, when the restaurants, and that really hasn't recovered all yet. We're still kind of in a trough. The cost of production is still below what it needs to be for most dairy farmers. So between the state and the federal programs, there were dollars that went to producers, and we're anticipating more coming We don't know where it's going to land yet. There's some USDA dollars for meat processing. Um, USDA just announced in late March some new programs, but it takes a little bit while to develop those. But safe to say there's tremendous amount of money that's coming to the state. It's once in a lifetime things that are going to be happening here, but we just got to be strategic of how we do it, make strong investments. Pat, with transportation, you got to be strategic of what you want to do in your
For
history
sure.
there
Right.
with big infrastructure projects. You just don't want to throw money away because this is we got to be and we have till 2024 under most of these programs. The second wave that came, the latest American Rescue Plan, it does not have to be spent immediately. So we can spend a little bit of time thinking about being strategic about, water, sewer, those type of things that will have great economic impacts that we never would have the dollars to really do unless we had these dollars coming up. So that's sort of where we're headed, and agriculture will play a role in that.
Yeah, and I do hope the legislature slows down a little bit and really thinks about where they want these American Rescue Act dollars to go, because looking at the way that the CARES Act dollars were spent, it was very much like spend, 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 ask questions later. And I don't think,
Yeah, there were some very tight deadlines on a lot of that because of the first ones had to be spent by December 31st.
Yep.
So there was kind of a, that was part of the, and then there was a lot of Treasury guidance around those.
Yep.
In the ag sector, it had to be directly related to COVID losses or expenses.
Right.
So there weren't planning dollars to refigure what we want agriculture to look like over the next 10 years. It was mainly direct losses and expenses. But these new dollars that are coming, I think we can be a little more strategic, a little more long-term, and be really, hopefully, smart about how we spend the money.
Yeah.
I hope that's how it ends up being, for sure.
Well, it doesn't sound like there were many restrictions on these new dollars. I read that somewhere, that it's not as restrictive as the first go round.
Yeah, I think it's much broader, and of course we're still waiting for some of the Treasury guidance that may throw some red flags up on some of the things that are being talked about. We'll work through those things as it comes along, and but we do have some time. 2024 is 4 years. 4 years.
Good. Excellent.
Awesome.
So on the commission, just to get back to that for a second, it really will, from what I'm reading, impact economic development, because there's supposed to be helping farmers, producers, and businesses to create new markets and new jobs. So do you anticipate that the ag sector will be able to meet these goals when you're looking ahead? Are you looking at new markets, new jobs?
Yeah, and I think we can reach those goals, and I think we need to, we don't want to. We want to, when we take 3 or 4 things we really want to work on, whether it's supply chain, whether it's distribution, whether it's, one thing that Vermont has always been good about is its quality. And that's where we have to be competitive. We're never going to be big. We're never going to be huge. But historically, we've always been, when we make cheese, when we make butter, when we produce milk, it's at a high quality. Same with our spirits and our beer and our produce and our maple. Our maple standards are higher than other standards across the country. It's in law, it's in statute, and we take that seriously. So I think those are the things that, we can focus on. Where can we distinguish ourselves under a very competitive market nationally? How do we distinguish ourselves from other states and other regions? And we can do that through quality and Vermont's reputation.
One of the things, speaking of quality, we touched on this a few minutes ago in regards to we're currently in the middle of sugaring season as we're recording this show. The Mountain Times ran an article a little while ago called "The Smells, Sights, and Sounds of Sugaring Season." And you had a prominent quote in that article saying that Vermont is the leading syrup producer in the nation. Nearly half the country's maple production is coming from Vermont's family farms, which is a staggering amount when you think about the size of Vermont compared to, the rest of the country and how much production comes out of here. And that production is increasing, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
great.
produce about 2 million gallons of maple syrup each year in the Green Mountains, all dependent on the weather. As we speak right here now, it's been a very we're in March here, the end of March, and it's been quite warm and going a little too fast. But
Wow.
you really never know. You really never know until the spouts are pulled on sugaring, because I'm talking right here now, it's warm, but it could freeze for the next 2 weeks and be locked up again, and then there'd be another couple of runs after that. The southern Vermont is usually a couple weeks ahead of the northern sections. A lot has to do with snow cover. I think people are a little nervous about this year. I think they're a little nervous that the crop won't be as big. But if there's not as much, sometimes the price goes up to the farmer. So if there's a tight supply, of course, we're always watching what happens in Canada. Canada has a tremendous amount of maple as well, so they can dictate some of those things. Some of the trends in maple, it's more than pancakes now. A lot of people, it's a natural sugar. So we're seeing it used for being infused in a number of things, whether it's barbecue sauces,
Yep.
whether it's in spirits or beer, whatever, salad dressings.
Yes.
I think those are the opportunities. We've done some studies on that, some maple studies on that, and that seems to be the trend where we can get some of those things infused in other things, because it is and the consumer is really into where their food comes from, whether it's natural, wholesome, and there's nothing more natural than Vermont maple, because it's basically sap coming out of a tree, and you boil it down, and there you go. It
There you go.
couldn't be anything more. No
Yeah.
additives or anything.
That's
Well,
great.
and
So,
it's healthier for people that have disorders like diabetes, for example. I think, right? There's some added
Yeah,
health benefits to maple syrup over like sugar cane, for example.
yeah. There's been a lot of studies. I think some out of Rhode Island they've done, and the benefits of pure Vermont maple, and it's great for putting on blueberries or yogurt and all those things that it can be anything. You can put maple on, put it in your coffee in the morning. It's wonderful, as
Do
opposed
that all
to
the time.
cane sugar. Yeah, yeah. Well,
that's
thank you for
great.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have got a recipe for salad dressing. Every time I bring it somewhere, I have to give the recipe, and it's got maple syrup in it, and they're always surprised.
Yeah.
But that's what gives it the taste. I mean, it's just fabulous.
I put mine in. I'm going to share one. I put mine in deviled eggs, believe it or not.
Get out. That's a great
So,
idea.
so it makes it, sometimes it's a sweet deviled egg. So I do it instead of mayonnaise. I do yogurt, cheddar cheese, and maple.
Whoa, so
So,
healthy.
well, yeah, yeah. So there it is.
It
So
is. That's great.
we know everyone's got backyard chickens now, and we have to get rid of their eggs. So I'm encouraging everyone to have deviled egg parties. But that's
Oh,
that's my go-to deviled egg, and I know a lot of people have different recipes. But
that's great. You heard it here first, folks. That's cool. So we've talked a little bit about COVID, and I wanted to talk about what the agricultural sector just stepped up on our food distribution around Vermont. I mean, I'm sure that they must have all participated in all the efforts that's been on the CAP agencies and all of the associations that are around that are trying to feed Vermonters who are struggling. 1 out of 3 Vermonters deal with food insufficiency, which blows my mind.
yeah, this is working with the Human Services Agency and the Food Bank. We had various programs. USDA had a box program
Mm-hmm.
that had starts and stops. The early rollouts were really quite impressive. They put butter, they put cheese, they put milk, they put some meat in, they put some vegetables in it. You rolled
Wow.
up to the distribution center, threw it in the trunk, and away you went. And that was a significant amount of food for a family for a week. Also, there were some benefits early on. There were some local products were in there. So, for example, Cabot had some dairy in there that helped get
Great.
some of the supply done as well. So it helped the farmer, but also helped Cabot. Um, and there's been some donation programs. Some of the dairy farmers where there wasn't a market for their milk. The Rotary got together in Vermont and raised some money to process some butter and process some
Great.
milk, and those were distributed to farmers that were in need. So there's been a lot of programs. So we've got the restaurant program, Everything Eats, which has helped the restaurant industry, try to survive until things get back to normal. And that's been a really valuable one where it's helping. And I think 10% of all those ingredients that go into those meals have to be local, which is significant. So it was helping the farmer, it was helping the person in need, but it was also helping the restaurants sort of keep their doors open by producing meals and then having drop sites. So there's been a lot of impressive work done through emergency management and all the food sector.
I thought that restaurant program was the best I heard. I was so excited to hear that because they were all struggling and spending, like here at the Wayside, they spend so much money to try to make it safe for their customers, most of whom are older folks like me. And then, they need to recoup that money. And I just thought what the state was doing with the restaurants was fabulous.
Yeah, and I think some people around the country have followed that and copied that program. Yeah, it's a really good program, and we've been able to use a lot of the FEMA dollars to finance that. So it will keep going, and I think it's going through the spring, and I suspect that if they find the dollars, they'll keep going until things really stabilize again.
So that idea stemmed from Vermont?
Yeah, it stemmed from Vermont. It started out of, I believe, the skinny pancake out of
Good for them.
Burlington, and it grew out of that. And then the state got together with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and got together with FEMA through emergency management, and they found the dollars to take it statewide, and then it's just grown, and the model's pretty easy to follow if you can get the dollars together and the coordination. But it's been and they have drop sites, for example, I think once a week up to Echo, people can come and get their meal for the day if they need it, or
That's amazing.
So
well,
it's really good.
I was shocked at that one in three Vermonters, and it used to be 1 in 4, which I was shocked at. Now Sue Minter was on the show not too long ago, and she told us it was 1 in 3 now, and I'm like, oh please, this is an agricultural state.
Yeah, UVM has done some research and some studies and surveys on that, and that data is coming out of what they've done on food insecurity. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
All right. So one of the things that I don't think we talk about a whole lot is the supply chain disruptions from COVID. There are, even for agriculture, there are things like grain and medicine that you need to bring in for your livestock. You have equipment like tractors and other sorts of processing equipment that may break. You need to get parts for. A lot of those parts come from China, and so they may not be available immediately. This is a problem that even the auto industry has struggled with, getting parts. A lot of the parts come from overseas, and some large auto manufacturers even had to shut down supply lines because they can't get the parts. So these are things that we don't really think about, but it's amazing that we've, the industry's just kind of found a way to get through it, make it work.
Yeah, we saw this, we're blessed, pre-pandemic, you could walk into a store, you walk into Shaw's, you walk into Hannaford's, everything is there. Toilet paper, choices. I mean, we have endless supply. As this unfolded, we discovered that the supply chain, we couldn't get the pork from Iowa to Vermont that was there. The supply chains were breaking down. So I think people have discovered that it's probably best to have more alternatives than having a food system that's maybe so nationalized. So it may be a regional food system. So the supply chain, we maybe want to think about New England more than we think about, things can go, we have produce that comes from California all the way to Vermont, of course, and that happens. But I think we saw the supply chain break down a little bit when those things couldn't happen, whether a plant was closed or whether they couldn't get the workers to do the transportation. We saw all those kind of things. So I think those are some of the things we need to work on, is about how do we secure ourselves and make it maybe not as complicated. But of course, with that, people, you want food to be affordable for people as well. So that's Scale is another thing that's why some of the food is so affordable. Is this the scale, but then you have only 4 or 5 people controlling that. So lots of issues to discuss. But I think COVID exposed a lot of our issues, and I think a lot of our consumers found out that it's a little more complicated than it appears when you walk into a supermarket.
Yeah, well, and even something as simple as the Canadian border, which we're just south of, right? And yes, trade and commerce can still cross the border, so you can still get a truck across if you need to get a truck across. But one of the things we've lost is that migratory workforce, right? That may move north and south depending on harvesting seasons. Like that's not really happening, and it's harder to bring in. I think you even touched on this earlier. Is it's harder to find workers to work on the farms because you can't. A lot of times you might bring them in from South America, or you might bring them in from somewhere else, and that workforce is just less mobile right now.
All right, and that's the hospitality industry is as well. A lot of foreign workers in hospitality, and that was the ski areas. I think they struggled with that as borders were closed, and of course especially the northern ski areas, when the borders closed, they're not getting that. They're not getting that traffic, which impacts agriculture because they're not buying as many Vermont products, and they're not going into those neighborhood farms or those farm stands, or not getting them. So a lot of it shifted to e-commerce and online to make up that difference.
And so I just wanted to, I'm skipping around the questions, Ben. We just signed a new meat inspection agreement with the USDA. Could you talk about that, and what does that mean to the benefit of our companies?
Yeah, and meat regulations are based on safety, but they can be a little complicated depending where you are. We have 2 programs traditionally in Vermont. We have a state program, and under a state program, everything that's inspected only can stay within the Vermont border. So it can't, if I'm processing meat in Barrie, and I'm under the state program, I can't sell it across the border into New Hampshire or go to New York. USDA inspected, it can go intercom every state. But now we have a hybrid program. I call it a hybrid program. So a lot of businesses in Vermont may not necessarily want to go through the federal and USDA program for whatever reason. They don't want to do that. We've got an agreement now, a cooperative agreement with USDA that we can do that, and they can still go. They've signed off on what we're going to do, and we've assured safety and whatever. So we're going to certify companies if they want to go through this new program. They can then sell their products across state lines under ARPU, and they don't have to have a USDA inspector come in and do the work. So it offers sort of a local feel to people. They're more comfortable with state inspectors sometimes. Sometimes USDA doesn't have enough inspectors to do the work as well. So this is going to give an opportunity, and it should grow markets. We had our first company sign up, and they've got the label on their product, and they can sell across state lines. So we're hoping more will take advantage of that, and it just offers, I think, a little more local opportunity, but will grow some markets.
And is this applicable to any state, or just like neighboring states, like regional?
No, any state. So
That's great.
So if you wanted to, with distribution, so they can get down into the New York markets now. They can, across. Especially, it's very important for a particular company that may be on a border. If you're processing in Hartford or Heartland and you want to, get into New Hampshire, you don't have to go through USDA now. You can come to us and get certified and go through.
How many outfits are certified through the state now versus USDA?
Well, we have various programs. It's hard to put a number on it, but if you take, there are fewer federal plants than there are state plants. So there's, I would say maybe a half a dozen federal plants, and then maybe a dozen state plants going through. That's just the slaughter capacity. And then there's people that also take meat and custom wrap it and do it as well under inspection. So it can get meat rules can get very complicated, and I try not to get too detailed on them because I could be really wrong.
Fair enough.
I get a call from a meat inspector like, that's not quite right, Anson. So I try not to play meat inspector on TV.
Uh, that's funny. But this is a big, it sounds like a big deal.
It
I mean,
is, and
this
there's
is
only
a
a few
big thing.
states. There's only, I think we were one of the first states to do it. I think in the East, we're the only one doing it right now. There's maybe 10 states across the country are doing it. And a lot of states don't even have state programs at all. And I've been talking to some of my colleagues in other states, and they're getting pressure to start state programs now because of the issues they faced during COVID with the USDA program. So it's interesting to see. We've always had a state program for a number of years, served us well. We backstop the federal people too. So if they can't get a USDA inspector in there, some of our state inspectors can go in and help. We've got a cooperative agreement with the feds. But states like Arkansas, who've never had a state program, are getting pressure from their legislature now to start a state program because of all the issues and gaps that were created in the COVID that exposed some of the issues with a one size fits all federal program.
So the meat that we would buy at the farmer's market in Montpelier, are those folks able to take advantage of this
They
and
could.
the state program?
Yeah, they could. They could sell there, but if they also wanted to get certified under this cooperative agreement, they could sell it
Nice.
at the farmers market in Lebanon, for example. So,
Nice.
yeah.
That's
So
great.
we hope over time more will take advantage of it. There's tremendous interest now in local meat,
Right.
particularly poultry. Poultry is big, turkey's big, and all in beef as well. So a lot of stuff going on at farm stands and farmers markets.
That's great. Could I ask you, you just issued a new strategic plan, which is getting a lot of play in the media. You brought in a whole bunch of focus
Yeah,
groups, 120. I read in about
yeah.
over
Here it is.
1,500. Yeah,
Here it is.
1,500
Here it
men.
is. Yeah, it's been a project. We work with Farm to Plate,
Yeah,
which is they were partners with us, and I'll go through some of and they're all pretty easily laid out.
great.
For example, it has dairy in it. It talks about the current conditions. It talks about the bottlenecks, the gaps, and then the opportunities, and it's laid out pretty easily. So, it has various subjects. We have value-added processing is in it. We also get into, we have a whole brief on eggs. We have a program on grains, where grains are out in Vermont, where we want to go with goats as well, with tremendous interest now in a bigger goat program, mainly based on what's happening at Vermont Creamery in Barrytown. They need more goat's milk. We're working with a significant dairy in Hyde Park that's transitioned from 300 cows, and the goal is to get to 1,500 goats.
Wow.
So it's significant dairy. Vermont Creamery relies on, they need to source more product because they're the second largest goat cheese dairy in the United States. Their markets are growing. They have butter as well. So it talks about goats, and over the next decade, what do we need to grow that particular industry so we can supply? What Vermont Creamery did is they developed the market for it, and now they're trying to, the consumers want goat cheese. They may have
Yeah,
not
I
wanted it,
love goat cheese.
so they've developed that market. Now we need to bring in farmers who want to supply the milk to that dairy. They
Great.
don't want it. They don't want to truck it in from other states. They want it here in Vermont. So we've got this sort of pilot project up in Hyde Park, the Jones family.
Mm,
They've taken the plunge. We worked with them to transition. They went up to Canada to get this incredible milking apparatus. It's a rotating milking machine. They dismantled it in middle of COVID, brought it across the border, put it back together, got the goats, and the goats started having their kids early.
which are the cutest animals in the world.
Oh, they're wonderful.
They bounce around and they jump around. They're
No,
adorable.
adorable. So they started having their kids early.
Yep.
They started had to milk them, so they were putting this machine together. Talk about stress, but they've got it down now, and they've probably got 400 there. They've
Oh,
600
wow.
total animals, and their goal is to get. And it's all based on some of the research that's been done to Vermont Creamery in Ayersbrook. There's another dairy in Randolph called Ayersbrook that's done a lot of work on goats, because we have to keep reminding ourselves a goat is not a cow, and you can't treat it like a cow.
What are
Too
the
cute.
I'm curious, like, two things about goats. Like, what is the amount of land required for goats compared to cows? And then also, what do the margins look like for goat farming as opposed to traditional dairy farming? And because that's a less regulated industry, your milk prices aren't as regulated as dairy.
Right. And this is a direct contract between, so the federal government isn't determining the price to the farmer on this. So they're out of that system. So what they're doing is there's a a goat's not going to give as much milk as a cow, so the volume's going to be less, but the price paid per hundredweight is going to be much better for the goat. But there's some inputs that are not going to be as high. So you're not going to spend as much probably on feed. You're probably not going to have to manage the manure as intensely as you would. It's going to be a dry pack manure. It's not going to be liquid and it may be involved in a dairy. You're not going to need as much land to feed those animals. So those are some of the things that go into the model of that in their business planning. Not as much water. They don't need as much water as they would to feed and maintain 300 cows as they would to probably not getting as much fertilizer. They're not going to have, in the particular case up in Hyde Park, they no longer had to lease some land that they needed to sustain their operation. So some of the inputs are much less, volume's a little less, but the price is made more, and they've pushed the pencil, and over time they think they can really make it work, and maybe others will learn. And they've got a tremendous amount of other people just looking and watching them, seeing what they're doing, how they did it,
Great.
and they're really energetic. They got a little extra in their step right now up there.
That's great.
Very
I was
cool.
I was going to ask you, because we were talking about attracting more farmers. What do today's Vermont farmers look like? Are they, been around for ages, and or are they young, energetic, as you're just saying about the Joneses? What do they look like?
Yeah, it's a big issue. We've got some farmers that are may want to retire, and they may want to pass it on to the next generation. They may want to sell their operation to maybe a new farmer, a beginning farmer. But there are a lot of issues related to it. There has to be that retirement fund, but there also has to be, how do you maybe feed two families in a transition? So there's a lot of
Ah,
issues, a lot of intergenerational issues. Farmers work well past retirement. A lot of them do, but there's a lot of financial issues and transitions, and there's work being done. Through UVM Extension has programs, Farm Viability has programs through the Housing Conservation Board, but it's a big issue. I mean, one farmer told me that he thinks he maybe have 10 years left and he doesn't believe that any of his children want to take over the
yeah,
farm, but he's got a significant farm, so he's trying to figure out, and he's planning now. He's like, 10 years, I don't want to be doing this. I want to be
yeah.
doing something else. But what do I do with these tremendous assets that he has? Is there anyone else coming along? How do I do it? Do I get do I get someone that's maybe looking for a farm? We have a farmer now that's down south. He's mentoring on another farm. He wants his own farm. So we're trying to find him a dairy that's 60 to 70 cows in a facility. But it's not as easy as it may appear, because the capital costs, real estate's pretty high for farming, and then so it's a lot of issues, but it's a huge issue.
Have we increased the number of farms? Last time you were on the show, you were talking about how many farms we've lost, and I'm sure we've lost some in COVID.
Yeah,
But I
we
thought,
lost. We've lost, particularly in the first few months. We lost, we're probably around 620, 640 dairy farms now. And there's some programs going on because we've got too much milk. Some of the
oh,
co-ops, we've got too much milk, and if there's too much milk, the price goes down, and it can't go places. So there's been some consolidation of some farms. There's some programs out there. The co-ops are managing how much farmers can produce, and if they produce over a certain amount, they're not getting paid as much for that milk. So there's a lot of things going on, and of course we Northeast, it's hard sometimes for us to compete because of our climate. You know, we're cooped up and it's cold
Oh.
and we can't grow grasses and 6 months out of the year. So it's a national federal system. So we're kind of in it. So what happens in New Mexico and California and Michigan impacts what happens, whatever we do in Vermont, good or bad.
You told me once, but even with all the losses of farms, that because of all the technology, we were able to keep up production as if those farms were still producing, which is, it sounds
Yeah.
like, because if you have too much milk, that's not good either. But
Well, it's the management. Cow comfort is big. Consumers want to make sure that their animals and all the animals are taken care of. So we have robotic milkers now that milk the cows when they need to be milked, when they want to be milked. So, yeah, the production out of an animal is increased over time. A lot of it, but some of these animals, the comfort of them, and when things are comfortable and they're taken care of, they can produce more milk. So, but
right.
yeah, a lot of factors involved in it, but
Yeah, a lot of work, morning
a lot
to
of work.
night, 24/7, right?
You bet.
No vacations.
No vacations. Yeah, you
No
can't take a
vacations.
vacation if
No,
you're a dairy farmer.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
There are one of the things we should touch on here is just the scope of what your agency does in dairy and agriculture. Obviously, food safety we talked about, land use, licensing regulations, public health, environmental labs. Water quality, something that you're invested in, and weights and measures, even
Yeah,
part of your agency.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. Just about everything in your daily life. Agriculture can touch you one way or the other. You go to gas up your car these days. You look on the sticker and you'll see it's been inspected by the Agency of Agriculture to make sure whatever you're putting in your tank is accurate through
Right.
weights and measures. We talked about maple earlier in the show. We make sure that the hydrometers that look at the maple content and in the how that's going. We certify those hydrometers. We do paving, like the big paving trucks, making sure that those trucks that are carrying and the scales and the weights are done properly.
Really?
Yeah, we do all that stuff. We have a big truck that goes out and does that stuff in the spring. You go into the grocery store and you look at at the checkout counter. You make sure that if you put some peppers down on the scale there, we make sure that's an accurate scale.
Hmm.
We look at make sure the packaging is done in that, making sure that if you go into Dollar General that the item on the aisle matches up to what's at the cash register. So we have inspectors that monitor that for consumer assurance.
You have like
Water
secret
quality.
shoppers that go in and like make sure things match up.
Well, once in a while, as the gas increases, the cost of gas increases, which we've seen lately. The phone generally would sometimes rings a little bit more.
Yep.
And if
Yeah,
we get a
I bet.
complaint, we all go out and do it. Your deli scales, those are checked
Oh,
to make sure for accuracy and making sure that and sometimes most of it is not anyone doing anything on purpose. Sometimes it just comes down to management
right.
and if different employees gets busy, all that kind of stuff. So we have that, but we have meat inspection, we have dairy inspection, both in the plants and also sanitation on the farms. We have entomology, so we have a lot of bugs and critters that may be pests that we have to keep an
For
eye on.
sure.
Emerald ash borers, one been in the news.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have that. We have mosquito districts. We keep an eye on the mosquito districts we have ticks. Ticks is another big one that we're helping monitor. We have people that go out and gather them in the summertime, test them for possibly carrying Lyme disease, working with the
Yeah.
health department.
Yeah.
Then we have economic development. We have the ag development division, where it works on trying to find markets for people, whether it's through trade or maple, dairy, that kind of work.
That's great.
So yeah, it's a
Busy.
fun little shop.
You never stop. It's amazing. Ticks, I think I'd pass on. But could you tell us about, I'm just looking down this list, the Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is one of only 3 in the US. How did we manage that?
Well, we were successful at putting a proposal together through USDA, and you're right, Vermont is hosts this one. Tennessee, I think, is the other state, and then Wisconsin. And what this does, this looks at giving farmers maybe alternatives and choices. Also gives processors technical assistance. For example, we've been working on some farmers that want to graze more of their animals, and it and when I think of grazing in my day, it's like, you put up a fence and you put the animals in the middle of it.
Go
That's
for
not
it.
what grazing is
Yeah.
anymore. It's very intensive. So you have to rotate. You have to, the cow may spend a day in one area and then they eat that all down and then they go to another area. So it's really intensive management with that. And there are consumers that want they want a product that's strictly grazed. So could there be an so there could be an opportunity to say, I want grass-fed grazing milk. So you go to so there could be an opportunity for some of our farmers for that.
Right.
The goat component is we talked about goats earlier, is an opportunity for there. Lots of technical assistance. We have an agritourism component of that. So if you have a dairy and you want to bring some people to your farm, we have some dollars through a granting program that's going to go out to them. Like, how do I put together an agritourism component with my dairy operation?
Nice.
Or no other sense of money. So we have considerable dollars that, we have about a $6 million USDA grant each year, and the money's going out into the field. And we're just trying to give people, because there's some things we can't control. The commodity market's really challenging for folks. So we're trying to give people choices, options, not preach, not saying one thing is the most important thing. We struggle that in agriculture. Like, I've talked about goats. Well, I don't want anyone to go away with the impression that goats is for everybody. It's not for everybody. But if someone wanted to explore goats, we want to give them the information, the opportunities they have. And that's really what we try to do. Is we don't want to preach, but we want to give people choices, options, and support.
And if somebody wants to, like you just said, your farm is organic, certified organic, that's not the easiest thing to come by.
No,
right?
that's,
I mean, the soil's got to be very mature and
yeah, it's got to
not
be
easy.
Yeah, and they have to manage the animals differently. Their feed is different. There's certain requirements of how many days they have to be outside, and we don't regulate it at the agency. We have an agency partner in Vermont called NOFA.
Oh, NOFA,
And
yes.
NOFA certifies those operations. So there's a set of, and it's evolved over time, and they certify people, and they have certain rules and regulations that they have to follow to be certified organic. But NOFA does that, so yeah, it's about 25% of our dairies are organic in Vermont, so it's significant.
Yeah, and it's healthy.
Well, I don't always do the organic thing, but I almost exclusively buy grass-fed beef. I think it tastes better.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of time do we have, Ben?
We got a few minutes. I do have a follow-up question. Speaking of innovation, I recently read an article about a farm, pretty sure it was in Addison County, that is doing a methane recapture.
Oh yeah.
System. They just installed it, and they're literally pumping methane out of they're producing methane from the manure that they are producing on site, capturing the methane and pumping it into a generation plant, and also into the Vermont gas pipeline, which is really interesting to me, and kind of a way of producing local energy, basically, which is kind of cool.
This is a really significant project, which was a long time in the making, and it's the Goodrich family in Salisbury. There's a connection to Middlebury College, so some of the energy is going to Middlebury. It involves food scraps as well. Feeding the digester involves manure. It's really and it's run by a company called Vanguard, and it's one of the major projects of Vanguard Energy. And this, you can well imagine, I think, Pat can understand the sort of the regulatory hurdles that took this to get done because you got multiple sectors. You got
Right.
energy, you've got natural resources, you've got agriculture, all coming together, and they've done a tremendous job, and it's just coming online. And through that, they've been able to consolidate some of their operation onto one farm. They've had animals at both farms, but these are 30-something farmers that are thinking about the future, and it's multi-generational farmers. They're
Great.
thinking about other ways to, generate income that necessarily is not solely on milk. So they're looking, could we produce energy, and that could be another income source for us. It's a fascinating project.
Great.
I've heard of dairy farmers putting up solar panels even on either their barn roofs or in pieces of land that weren't well suited for growing food crops. Seems like a trend to me that, as the farmers are looking to diversify, they're getting more and more into energy as one of those things to diversify into. Is that your sense, or do you think that that's just one piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, and there's been some incentives to do that over the years. Some of those I think are expiring at this time, but we saw some projects that were being completed this year. And of course, farmers usually have a lot of land, and if it's strategically placed where it doesn't, it's land that can't be used for crops or pasture or whatever, but could be used for this particular, and there's a lot of barns, big structures, strategically placed. And so you're seeing a lot of that over I would say the last 3 or 4 years. There's been a lot of work on that. And we even have some that are looking at, you can graze, if it's done properly, you can graze some animals under those. We've seen sheep or goats being
cool.
grazed.
Say like goats.
Oh,
I think
cool.
I saw
Yeah.
something like that recently too.
Yeah, if we get the goats not to chew every cord in the world, but
yeah, you got to
jump all over
steel
them.
conduits or something.
Yeah, but there's a lot of work being done on that, and so it's multi-purpose use, so it's kind of cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Could we talk a little bit about good old milk prices? How are we doing for our farmers? That's always an issue.
Right now, as I talk to you right now, it's not where it should be. There's some forecasts that improve midsummer, late fall. We're seeing, I just looked at the figures today, production is down in Vermont, which is not, some other states it's up. And I think I mentioned earlier, what happens somewhere else can impact us, but it's up in other states, which is significantly impacting the price here. But we're down about 3% in production in the north, in Vermont right now. We're in the top 20 dairy state. New York's number 5. They're a big player, significant big dairies in New York. So they're number 5. Big states like, California, and we've seen dairies going up in Michigan, a lot of dairy in Michigan now, a lot of dairies in Idaho as well. Some of them left California and went to Idaho. A lot of it has to do with water rights and et cetera. Missouri's another big state. Was growing in Texas. It slowed a little bit in Texas. So.
I don't. Do we ever get to a point where it's good? Seriously, I mean, does it ever level out?
I think we the problem is that farmers are on a treadmill because here it's pretty simple. When the price of milk goes down, they have to produce more to make up for that loss. And then when the price becomes decent, that's the time that they need to make money. Sometimes they put animals on. But at some point, I think Vermont has advocated to have some sort of system where the supply and the demand, if you can get those together. But it's very challenging with different states, different scales of economy, different inputs. So it's very difficult and for the most part, dairy and agriculture is not political. It's not partisan, but it's usually based on, the demographics and economies of scale and so forth, and how people manage that. So it's very difficult to get a national system changed.
Yeah.
Would it make more sense, and this is probably a bigger question than we have time for in the next minute or so that we have left, but do you think that it would make sense to regionalize milk pricing as opposed to having a national milk price?
Yeah, and I think that's probably that we would, if we could do that. We did that We had something called the Northeast Dairy Compact,
Right.
and that worked on that. But other regions didn't like it, and it had to be approved by Congress, and it had a timeline on it, and basically it came down to some other regions of the country thought the East was getting a better deal, even so it collapsed. And they disbanded it. But it was a regional. It was Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a period of time that there was stability. People knew what the price was coming from. It wasn't really hurting the consumer at all. Everyone seemed to be pretty pleased with it, but other regions didn't like it, so it collapsed.
Gotcha.
Too bad. I'm going to ask one quick question because I'm sure we're running out of time. How are our farmers doing with the phosphorus, algae pollution issue and water quality? I mean, have we found a way to address their issues and water quality issues?
We've made significant progress on some of those issues. Farmers are heavily regulated in this. They have certain, it's called required agriculture practices. They have to manage their manure. They have to have adequate storage. They can only spread certain times of the year. They can't spread on certain areas. They have to monitor that they don't apply too much in areas, all those things. But they've made significant, and a lot of the progress that we have made through, cover crops, no-till, manure injection, conservation practices of containing runoff, leachate are all paying dividends, and about 95 to 96% of the progress of reducing phosphorus right now is attributed to agriculture's progress in that. So a lot more to do. We have targets that we have to make and meet. So yeah, it's a managing a dairy now, or any operation, that is one of their main focus areas now, is to make sure that there's no runoff going into the waterways, and there's significant penalties if they do that.
Yeah, because I'm sure every farmer understands the importance of clean water. But we did start out as something about making with them with phosphorus in the water, that was sort of okay years ago, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, we some of the things we didn't know about. I mean, we applied a lot of phosphorus over the years, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and it was, and phosphorus is important to grow crops. We have to keep in mind that it is a nutrient. You just have to manage it properly and make sure it doesn't, run off. And there's buffer zones, so all kinds of regulations related to it.
Right. That's the problem. It's a nutrient. You want it on the field, not in the water.
Yeah, right. And how do you stop it?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think we're out of time. Are we not, Ben?
Yeah, we are out of time, but Anson, thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, Anson, very much. You are a busy guy. Lots of stuff going on.
Well, it's all great.
Yeah, we thank you for your service, and you've got a great staff, if I may add.
Oh, well, you do. I'm the luckiest guy in state government. They're
great group.
Hardworking, practical, common sense people who get up every morning hoping to do a better job than they did the day before. So.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.